Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens, and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I am delighted to have David Childers here with us today to talk about what writers get wrong with Hollywood, with movie making. David Childers has worked for 40 plus years in the entertainment business. He has been involved in feature films, hundreds of commercials, television shows, and movies for TV. He was fortunate to work with Industrial Lights and Magic, ILM, back in the early 1980s, which aided his early career working on major motion pictures. After about 4 years, he was hired on to be a key grip for a movie for TV. This was the start he needed to become the key grip on many feature films and commercials. David is married to Julie Childers, and they each have two grown children and a total of seven grandchildren. David's daughter is a hairstylist working in the entertainment business in Los Angeles. After living in California his entire life, they moved to Utah, where they currently reside. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on the channel today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it. This will be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I was delighted to meet you at Books in the City in Salt Lake. So obviously, I just gave a quick rundown about your background, but can you give a little bit more information about the projects that you've worked on? I know that people will probably recognize a couple names.
Sure. Well, like you said it earlier, I started off at ILM back in the early 80s, and we did stuff like E.T. and Poltergeist and Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones were a few. And then from there, I just kind of moved on and started doing other bigger projects. And, eventually did stuff like Mrs. Doubtfire. And we did two Matrix movies. We did No Country for Old Men. We did Milk. Those are all some big hits. And then we did Blue Jasmine, in which Kate Blanchett won an Academy Award for Best Actress on. So I've been really fortunate. It's been a great run. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, you were really in the middle of so many just noteworthy seminal movies.
Right.
So that is awesome. And so you were the key grip. For people who don't know, what does a grip do?
Well, basically, the key grip is the head of the department for the grip department. He'll have his best boy grip, which is his right-hand man. He'll have some dolly grips who push the dolly grip, the dollies around, the cranes, and then the rest of the grips will be part of his support crew. And we kind of control the lighting on the set. We run, like as I said, we run the cameras and the dolly cranes. If we're shooting in vehicles, we rig cameras and lights and whatever types of diffusion we need on vehicles, motorcycles, roller coasters, you name it, we've done it. So we're all over the place. And we're also kind of the safety guys on this set. The MacGyvers also, as I like to say.
Yeah, you have to be very inventive to figure out how to get some of those shots. I'm sure.
Correct.
So, what other people besides grips who are working on all of those mechanics and getting the look right for the shot? What other people are typically on a Hollywood set? Obviously, you have the actors. I assume you have the directors. What other roles are there that maybe don't get the fame or the credit that other
Right.
roles
Well, the
do?
director has his assistants, which is the assistant directors who the first AD runs the set, and then they have their crew. And then you have obviously the camera department, and you have your cinematographer who creates the look of what he wants or she wants for the set. And you have your whole camera department, you have your electric department, you have props, set decorating, hair, makeup, wardrobe. It even gets down to we have the transportation guys, the special effects guys. So on a big feature, it's pretty typical to have between 100 and 150 people on a crew.
Oh my goodness. Not only on a crew, but on the set on any given day, or about
Well,
how many people would be typical for a big budget movie.
yeah, I mean, on this set, I mean, we have also a thing what's called a base camp where all the makeup trailers are at, all the hair and wardrobe people are. So not everybody's directly on the set at one time, but I mean, most of the time you're going to have 30, 40, maybe 50 people in or right outside the set, ready to go.
That is so many people. I would imagine a dozen, 15, but it sounds like
That's for a little tiny show.
yeah, I was going to ask about that as well, since you've worked on not only these movies that people have heard of, but a lot of different projects over the years. What are some of the differences that you found between working a big movie set and then like an indie set or even a commercial? Yeah, what is the difference in crew and tone? What have you noticed?
Right. Well, most of the time, like for commercials example, or in small indie film, you're going to have a much smaller crew, maybe a third to a fourth the size I was talking about earlier. So for the grip department, we might just have like a key and my best boy and maybe a couple of grips or something like that. And the whole crew is going to be much, much smaller. We kind of have to, on a smaller budget, you have to figure out what you're going to do, know ahead of time pretty much what we're going to do. And then if we have to make adjustments, we will. But, we can't just be all of a sudden doing a 180 and say, okay, we're not going to look this way now. We're going to look out that way. And, the whole world is not going to work for us out there. So it's a totally different, you know, element of what working on a big set as opposed to a small set, honestly. And the indies are also normally less budget. The one thing you don't have for sure that you have on the big budget movies, you have great caterers. Most of the time, these smaller ones, you have kind of mediocre caterers. That's always important. You got to feed the crew. If we don't get fed well, it makes unhappy stomachs. So,
Yeah, that's an aspect that I don't often think about. I mean, I've definitely heard that there are daily caterers and things,
right,
but
right.
yeah, so I've read several books set on movie sets, and obviously there are shows and movies about that process. What are some of the misconceptions that you encounter when you're reading or watching content about movie making?
Uh, I think one of the things I think a lot of times they make it seem like it's so simple to do and easy.
Mm,
You know, I mean, it depends on like I said, the environment you're working in. If you're working outside in the rain, in the cold during the winter, it's most of the time not a real pleasant, happy set, especially if you're working doing exterior shots, or vice versa. Like when we were working in the Mojave Desert on the right stuff. We'd have 100 and 110-degree days out there in the desert, sometimes on the tarmac, and it was just blazing hot. It wasn't even fun to be out there.
mm,
But you get through it and you just do it. So it's not all the glamour that everybody thinks it's going to be. The environment we work in just would make such a big difference. It doesn't takes away all the glamour and stuff. Working in the desert, working at the beach on hot days, working in the mountains in the snow, and it's
mm.
cold out. I mean, so we deal with the environment. That's the one thing we as a grip department really have to face a lot of times, whether it be the sun, the rain, the wind. We were doing a commercial one time up in Sonoma County, and out of nowhere, which has never happens, a little twister came right through the town of Sonoma, and it
Gosh.
blew over light standards. We had stuff up in the air, just totally blew over and wiped out, and it was just, you don't expect those things, so you can't prepare for them. So those things happen.
Yeah, so you're saying that more often than not, there's that mythology of Hollywood and the glamour of it and the ease of it. You get the
Right,
shot, you move on, but it's
right.
a lot more technical and troubleshooting if I can paraphrase you correctly there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what are some of the things you wish more people understood about your role in movie making or about Hollywood in general? I know you've kind of touched on it, but what else would you like to see represented more often? That kind of thing.
I think for the most part, most of the people that work in the business, maybe not in some of the states, but in California, the big states, we all belong to a union out there. So fortunately, we had to get fed on time and this and that, and they provide all these different things. I think some of the unfortunate things I've seen in doing some of these smaller indie shows is they don't provide all that necessary needs that we have sometimes. And it's always kind of, you have to fight tooth and nail to get certain little things that seem like no big deal, but we
Hmm.
need to make it work. Whether it be a piece of equipment because it costs too much to rent, or, that's a big problem I see with the smaller projects. But you learn over the years, small projects, you just have to adapt with what you have. If you don't have the whole big gamut of equipment, then you do with what you have. And so that's kind of what I have to say about that.
Okay, you making do with a lot less, and you don't have as many protections necessarily, and
Right. And they can't expect more from us. They understand that this is the money they have, and so we do what we do and just make it work.
it's a
So
good thing you have that creative streak of being able to jimmy something together to to get the shot or do what needs to
Absolutely.
be done.
So
So for writers who are interested in researching more about the process of movie making, either to set a book in Hollywood or to maybe try their hand at screenwriting, where would you recommend that they go next for accurate information?
for accurate information,
Mhm.
well, like it's interesting about, like I said in my when I wrote my book, is that I had no intention of getting into this business. I was going to go into the FBI. So for me, when I got started, I was green as green can be. And I just basically, being on the set, you just learn what people do and how they do things. Um, for a writer, though, I think to write about, you have to experience what happens. I mean, you have to
Hmm.
visit movie sets, see what people are doing, what the sound people are doing, what the makeup people are doing here, and how the camera works and stuff like that. So, to write a book without experiencing it, I don't think you could do it. I mean, this took me a lot of thought process to write this book because it spans over 40 years, and I had to go back and watch the movies over and over again to get ideas even to put into it. Certain things you remember and other things I have no idea. So that's why you go back and watch movies. And like I said, you got to be part of it to really write about it. And that's why when I wrote this book, I decided that nobody had really written a book about their experiences in the film business over this period of time. There's like somebody written about, different series or something like that, but never just kind of like a whole career of what they experienced.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask more about that book here in a second. But for people who want to get on the set, really get that hands-on experience, which can't be, you can't find anything better than that firsthand experience.
Right.
Is it possible to find local productions and ask to kind of shadow for a day? Is that okay to do, or would that be very
It
disruptive?
It is. Yes, you could do that. I mean, we have a lot of times we'll have like on jobs, we have students that maybe it's their summer and they're studying film or something at a big school, and they'll come out and work as just like an intern for a day, and they just kind of follow us around and do what we have to do. And the biggest thing, I mean, most of the production stuff is out there. It's online now as far as in production, what's happening, what's going to happen, stuff like that, where films are at. There's a good location things out there to find, and you just have to contact people, or sometimes you find out that they're shooting in, Park City. Say, hey, let's just drive up for the day and find out. We'll just hang out and watch, and as long as you don't get in the way, it's cool.
I
So,
like that. Just kind of go rogue, shoot your shot, see what happens.
right.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I would assume just with my personality that I would be getting in the way. I would want to let the professionals do their thing without me hanging around. But I mean, if you get the green light and you're respectful on set, I guess that's all
Yeah,
fair game.
you're gonna have to play a distance. You're not going to be necessarily right there on the set, but I mean, just behind the camera somewhere here or there. And I mean, they're always going to try to have the production assistants trying to clear the crowd out so we can have a scene, so it doesn't look like a bunch of looky-loos looking at us while we're filming, which happens. So
Right, I would imagine, especially in California, where everybody's expecting movies to be made.
yeah, right. Well, it's not as like it used to be right now, unfortunately. So hopefully it's going to get better.
Yeah, well, tell us more about your book. You've teased it a little bit, but haven't really told us what it's called, where you can get it, what it's
Right.
about.
Well, the name of my book is Let's Roll Some Film. And the reason it's called that is most people wouldn't understand it is because when I started back in the day, everything was done in film, and now everything's 99.9% is done digitally now. So it's a whole different world. So it was kind of like that's where I got started. So that's why I said, let's roll some film. Um, and so basically, I don't know if I said this earlier, but I had no business getting into this business. I was actually had finished college, had worked 2 summers, my last 2 years of school in the business, just as a gopher and everything else and I was going to go to the FBI Academy. And this girl I was going out with, her dad was in the business and asked me, hey, do you want to work a year and make some money? And I said, oh, I'm young. I'm like 22 now. I said, what the heck? So I worked 1 year and then I worked a second year and I did really well. And I fortunately made enough money to buy a house. And I said, oh, maybe I should just to go this way, you know.
Sounds
So
great.
it just kind of was, and so much when I first started out is like anybody, you can go to film school, learn a lot of different things, but so much of what we do is on the set. You're learning by how other people do things, and you get creative. How do you learn to start doing things, whether you're controlling the light or you're doing a certain project this way or that way, and you'll find out what works best for you and what your boss tells you to do too when you're starting. So, and then I've just been really fortunate. I started up at ILM in the early 80s, and that was just a great uh, starting point basically for me in the film business. I mean, most of us, everything then was everybody was all trial and error. We'd go out and we'd try to do something and we'd take a look at it and see how it looked. If it worked, we'd send it down to LA to get it okayed, and then we do it for real. So it wasn't just like, okay, this is how it's going to work. It was a lot of trial and error,
Did you
because
do all
everybody,
that before the entire crew was there and the cast and everybody, or would you do it with them and then get the
well,
final versions okayed?
yeah, well, when I was at ILM, we were basically doing all the visual effects. So basically, we have talent there sometimes, but a lot of the times we were just doing the visual effects. Whether it's people falling off cliffs or things happening or this or that, or they're riding the speeder bikes through the forest. I mean, that was all shot against blue screen and stuff like that. And then we had shot the previous plates up at the Redwoods in Northern California. So there. We worked with talent then a lot, but most of it was all the practical physical effects before computer graphics came along when I first started there.
I
So,
love practical effects myself.
yeah, I mean, these days there's just too much computer graphics for me anyway.
I agree. There's a place for them. Sometimes they're great, but it's tough to beat the
Yeah,
practical.
right,
You can tell the difference most of the
right,
time.
right.
So, since your book is about those 40 years that you spent in Hollywood, what are some final stories if you have a couple favorites that you could leave us with?
Okay, well, I have to say that the movie that I probably had more fun on than anything else was when we did Mrs. Doubtfire. It was just such a joy to work with Robin and Chris Columbus, their director. We just had so much fun. It was a fun, happy environment, and everybody wanted to be there. And at first, nobody knew what we had when we started, but by the end of that movie, we knew we had a great project. I mean, Robin had to go through makeup, hair, wardrobe. It took him almost 4 hours every day to get ready to become Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, that was one great one. And then obviously another great movie that we did was The Right Stuff. And that was my second movie I worked on because it had so much history about the United States and the speed breaking the sound barrier and the Mercury 7 astronauts. And we were just doing things and trying things to make it work. And we worked in the desert for almost 8 weeks, and that was brutal. So, um, I've just been so fortunate as I share in my book that I've been able to work with so many great people in my life, directors, actors, cameramen, other crew people that you kind of form a family. Obviously everything's not going to be perfect. I have one book in there I talk about, I won't even mention right now, but we had a lot of problems on this movie, and I ended up working on it for 9 months. And it was 9 months of not being a happy camper most of the time. But like I said, there's just another great person I worked with, and I give so much credit to, a great man, is an Academy Award winner, is director Danny Boyle. We did a movie with him, and he is just such a great guy. We did the remake of the Jobs movie, and it was one of the Steve Jobs with Michael Fassbender, and Danny directed it, and he was just an amazing guy to work with, just so talented and just a great guy to work with and easygoing. And I mean, you're going to have your people who are your screamers and your yellers, and you're going to have your people who are pretty cool and mellow and stuff. And that's kind of it's nice to have a set like that, but it doesn't always work that way. So anyway,
Yeah, I imagine it couldn't be all sunshine and roses, but I'm glad that you have those moments that were really the high points
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
So, where can people find out more about you and your book online?
You can go to my website, which is davidchildersbooks.com. I've got pictures on there. I've got stories. I've talked about people I've worked with, and that's you can go there. You can go into the other sites out there. You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those other ones. But that's where I try to steer people to is to go to my website. Um, So anyway, but it's been fun. I mean, I've actually sold some books in Europe now and stuff like that, which has been pretty cool. And we've done some book signings, and so you know, it's a process.
That it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So,
I will put those links down below if you're interested in following up. The book has some fascinating stories in there, it looks like to me. So I will definitely be investigating that website for a few more nuggets. This has been a delight. Thank you for spending the afternoon chatting with me and giving me a little bit more understanding behind the scenes of these movies that I love. I love behind the scenes content anyway, and so
great.
when we had the chance to meet at that book event, I thought this is, I've got to follow up and ask a few more questions and just pick your brain a little more. So thank you for being willing to do that.
Oh, I'm glad we did. It was nice to meet you there too. I'm glad we did this today. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to like it, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you next week for more writing, publishing, and indie author life. All right, bye.